Today we are going to break your brain a little bit. And I don't mean that lightly. I mean we are going to take the gray matter, put it in a blender, and just hit puree.
It is definitely going to require some mental gymnastics. The material we are tackling today it is definitely out there.
Right. And just to set the stage for everyone listening and to warn you a bit, this is not a self-help book about organizing your closet or manifesting a prime parking spot at the grocery store.
No, definitely not.
The premise here is bold. Very bold. The source of this information actually claims to be a crystal dragon named Althar. So yes, we are dealing with high-concept channeled material here.
Which I know means half our audience just rolled their eyes.
Yeah, and the other half just leaned in a lot closer.
Exactly. But here is the thing. Even if you are a total skeptic about the dragon aspect, and we're just presenting what the text says here, impartially, the philosophy inside this text is fascinatingly consistent.
It really is rigorous. It basically claims that enlightenment, that big golden finish line everyone in the spiritual community is always chasing, isn't actually the finish line at all.
Right. And that is where this text completely diverges from almost every other spiritual tradition out there. The text argues that enlightenment is really just the warm-up.
The warm-up.
Yeah, it's just the prep work for something much stranger and much more complex. And, frankly, much more difficult. Something called embodied ascension.
Which honestly sounds like a sci-fi term, like something straight out of a Marvel movie.
It does. But the way Althar describes it is surprisingly practical. He blends this high-level physics of consciousness, the literal mechanics of how reality is built, with a very personal and almost tragic narrative about human history.
It's a wild mix. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a very specific claim made in the text, the claim that you, the listener, are the sole creator of your reality.
And we want to be absolutely clear here. We don't mean that in the positive thinking bumper sticker kind of way.
No, we are not talking about just smiling and the world smiles with you. We are talking about mechanics.
We are talking about the specific mechanics of intention, of perception, and how you actually manipulate energy at a quantum level. We are going to look under the hood at the engine room of reality itself.
We're also going to get into the Atlantean trauma, which I know sounds like a bad prog rock band name, but it is actually this idea of a collective scar in our DNA, a scar that makes us terrified of our own power.
Plus, we will be talking about the Sword of Clarity.
I love that name, even if it sounds a bit Dungeons and Dragons.
It is a very dramatic name,
Okay.
but its function is incredibly precise. It is not a weapon for fighting enemies. It is a tool for cutting time.
Cutting time. Okay, we have to unpack this because usually when we talk about spirituality or enlightenment, we think about escaping the world, right?
The monk on the mountain.
Exactly, the monk on the mountain. He is sitting there dissolving into the light. Bye-bye bills, bye-bye traffic jams, bye-bye awkward family dinners. He is just out of here.
That is the traditional view, yes. And the source material here defines that specific state as stage 1.
Okay, stage 1. So let's define the baseline for everyone. What exactly is stage 1 according to Althar?
So stage 1 is awakening and enlightenment. Althar defines this very specifically, and it is important we get this definition down before we move into the deeper mechanics. Awakening in this context is simply seeing reality as it truly is.
Which means what exactly?
It means seeing that reality is just consciousness expressing itself in changing forms. It is the process of losing false identities.
Give me an example of a false identity. I think I have a few.
Well, almost everything you think you are is a false identity.
Yeah.
You stop saying, I am this job. You stop saying, I am this anxiety. You even stop saying, I am this physical body.
Right. You realize you are the observer behind the mask, the thing looking out through the eyes.
Precisely. And in most spiritual traditions like Buddhism or Hinduism and various forms of mysticism, once you hit that point, once you realize you aren't the body, the goal is usually to drop the body.
To leave.
Yes. You return to the source, you dissolve the drop back into the ocean, the game is over, you won, and you get to go home to the bliss of nothingness.
It is the ultimate exit strategy.
It really is. But Althar says, wait a minute. Why did we come here in the first place?
Yeah. If the goal was just to leave, we could have just stayed home.
That is exactly his point. If the point of physical reality was to escape physical reality, it's a completely redundant exercise.
That's a very valid point. So what is stage 2 then?
Althar introduces stage 2, which he calls embodied ascension. And he stresses heavily that this is an optional choice. It is the new step. The goal here isn't to leave.
The goal is to stay.
The goal is to stay in the physical body after you've become enlightened. But, and this is a massive, but you cannot just stay as you are.
Because the body can't handle it.
Exactly. You have to integrate something he calls the light body into the physical matter.
So you are basically bringing the divine awareness all the way down into the mud. You are trying to hotwire a biological meat suit to run on high voltage divine electricity.
That is a very good analogy. You are merging the absolute highest frequency possible with the extreme density of physical matter. And the text uses this brilliant, if slightly hubris analogy for this. You call it the ping pong ball analogy.
I absolutely loved this visual because it is so stupidly simple. But the more I thought about it, the more it explained basically my entire life. Break down the ping pong ball for us.
Okay, so imagine an enlightened soul. This is pure consciousness, totally free of baggage. Imagine that soul is a ping pong ball. It is incredibly light. It is filled with air, or in this case, light. It has absolutely no density.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Light as a feather.
Now imagine mass consciousness, the collective human experience, the soup we all swim in every day. Imagine that is the ocean. And this ocean is heavy. It is made of fear, survival instincts, drama, taxes, the 24-hour news cycle. It is very dense water.
Got it. The ocean of humanity.
If you take a ping pong ball and you push it underwater down into the ocean of humanity, what happens the second you let go?
It shoots right back up to the surface. It just pops out. It can't stay down there.
Exactly. It has too much buoyancy. The physics simply do not allow it to stay submerged on its own. The text argues that pure enlightenment is actually incompatible with the dense collective consciousness of humanity. It is just too light.
So this basically explains the whole hermit phenomenon.
Yes, it does. Usually, when someone becomes fully enlightened, one of two things happens. One, they die. The physical body just gives out because the frequency mismatch is simply too high.
The ping pong ball pops out of the water, meaning they leave the physical plane entirely.
Right. Or two, they have to isolate themselves. They go live in a cave or a secluded monastery just to maintain that state without popping back out. They have to stay far away from the heavy currents of normal human life.
Because the ocean, the modern world is constantly trying to spit them out. The buoyancy of enlightenment is too strong against the density of Walmart.
Exactly. So Althar says the problem is this. How do you keep the ping pong ball underwater without just holding it down by force all the time? How do you stay enlightened while shopping for groceries or sitting in traffic?
You can't just hold it down because holding it down takes effort. And effort is basically the opposite of flow. So you have to make the ball heavier.
You have to make it heavier. And this is crucial not by filling it with heavy stuff like trauma or karma or bad habits.
Yeah.
You don't want to fill it with mud to make it sink.
That would defeat the purpose.
Right. You have to create a completely new vessel. This is the integration of the light body with matter. You are creating a vehicle that is dense enough to survive the crushing pressure of the ocean depths, which is human life, but structured enough to actually hold the pure frequency of the divine.
So it is kind of like building a submarine. A submarine is heavy enough to sink down into the deep water, but it holds an atmosphere of light, breathable air inside it so the crew doesn't get crushed.
That is a perfect way to put it. You are constructing a vessel, the light body, that allows you to be in the world, but not of it, in a very literal, energetic sense. And the text emphasizes that this is incredibly difficult. It is referred to as new physics. It hasn't really been done en masse before.
New physics. I really like that phrase. It implies that we are kind of the test subjects for this whole experiment.
We are the pioneers, according to Althar. The universe is watching to see if we can actually pull this off, staying fully enlightened while paying taxes and dealing with slow Wi-Fi.
Which feels totally impossible some days. I mean, I can sit there and feel enlightened on a Sunday morning with my cup of coffee, but the very moment I get a passive-aggressive email from my boss, the ping pong ball shoots right out of the water, and I am just a reactive, angry mess again.
And that is exactly why the light body structure is so fundamentally needed. But before we can even begin to build that, we have to understand the raw materials we are working with. Althar doesn't just say believe hard enough and it happens. He breaks down what we actually are at a structural level. And this gets into the sphere of consciousness.
This part completely broke my brain a little bit, because I have a very specific sense of where I am.
Most people do.
If I ask you where you are, you point to your chest. Or if you really sit down and think about it, you feel like you are a tiny little point right behind your eyes, like a little pilot sitting in the cockpit of your skull just looking out the windows.
Exactly. That is the fundamental human illusion. We all operate from a center point. We triangulate everything in our reality from this tiny dot of me inside the head. But Althar says this is fundamentally incorrect.
So what are we actually then?
He defines the true self, what you actually are beneath the biology, as pure consciousness. And he asks you to visualize this as a sphere of void. It is completely empty. It is transparent. But here's the part that really trips people up. This sphere has absolutely no center.
Yeah, my brain just rejects that immediately. How can a sphere not have a center? Basic geometry class says otherwise.
In physical 3D geometry, yes. But in the geometry of consciousness, the center is everywhere. Althar clarifies that the true self is the entire sphere. You are everywhere within it simultaneously. You are not the tiny dot looking out. You are the space in which the looking happens.
Okay, you are going to have to help me visualize this, because I am definitely still stuck in the cockpit.
Okay, let's try this. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine your consciousness isn't trapped inside your head. Imagine it is a bubble that extends maybe 3 feet around your physical body in all directions.
Okay, I'm in a bubble.
Now, usually you feel like you are the dot right in the middle of that bubble. But try to shift your perspective right now. Imagine you are the surface of the bubble. You are the air inside the bubble. You are the space behind your back, just as much as you are the space directly behind your eyes.
Wow, that is really disorienting. It makes me feel very expanded, but also super unanchored.
That unanchored feeling you are noticing is just the ego losing its tight grip on the center point. You are the container and you are the content. And he expands this image even further to explain how we are all connected to each other. He calls it the sphere of spheres.
Which honestly sounds like a psychedelic album cover from the 70s.
It does. But visualize it like a massive ocean. An ocean isn't just one big solid block of water. It is made of infinite tiny drops. But every single drop is the ocean. Althar suggests we view the true self as a massive ocean containing infinite subspheres.
Okay, I'm following you.
One subsphere is you as a human right now listening to this deep dive. Another subsphere might be you in a past life. Another might be you in some non-physical realm. They're all distinct little bubbles, but they're all floating in the exact same water.
And they all contained within the big overarching me.
Yes. And crucially here, each drop, meaning your current human soul right now, contains the full absolute power of the entire ocean. You're not just a fragment. You're not a broken piece trying to get back to the whole. You are the whole thing, just temporarily focused into a smaller sphere for a specific physical experience.
That is a remarkably big claim, because I definitely do not feel like the whole ocean. Most days I feel like a very confused little drop.
That is simply because you are identifying exclusively with the boundaries of the drop instead of the water inside it.
Okay, so if I am this giant sphere of void, this ocean squeezed into a drop, how do I actually create this reality? How do we get from a transparent void to stuff like the microphone in front of me, the table, the coffee cup, the impending car payments? How does it happen?
This is where we have to introduce the concept of pure energy. The text explains that consciousness creates a specific substance called pure energy. It is described as chaotic potential. Think of it like a massive cloud of unformed digital pixels.
Like raw clay,
The what?
or just raw code waiting for a command.
It is the raw clay of reality. And the command that actually shapes that clay is intention. The sequence works like this. Consciousness has an intention. The pure energy instantly responds and arranges itself into waves or forms to match that intention. And then reality is created.
But wait a second. If I intend to have $1 million right now, and I am intending really hard right now, nothing just happened. The pixels didn't move. There is no briefcase of cash on the table.
And that right there is the classic objection. Everyone says I visualized a Ferrari every day for a year and I'm still taking the bus. But Althar explains the mechanics behind this. There are 2 main reasons why your $1 million didn't magically appear. First is the density of this physical reality. It creates a massive time lag. In the non-physical realms, thought creates form instantly. But here it is like trying to run through waist-deep molasses. The energy moves very slowly.
Okay, so there is a built-in delay. That makes sense.
But the second reason is much more important. You said, I intend to have $1 million. But underneath that thought, what is the actual feeling radiating throughout your entire sphere?
Probably something like, I do not have enough money. Or I really hope this works because I am completely broke.
Exactly. Your core frequency, your true underlying intention was lack. You were vibrating a massive signal of, I am broke. And the pure energy just looked at that signal and said, okay, you want more lack. Coming right up.
Ouch. So the energy absolutely does not listen to the words coming out of my mouth. It listens to my actual state of being.
Correct. It does not judge you. It does not decide if you deserve the money or not. It just blindly copies the strongest frequency in your sphere. But here's the real kicker. And this was the huge aha moment for me when I was reading the source material. The text plainly states, without perception, There is no creation.
This is a radical, radical idea. We usually think the world is just there, like a pre-built stage set, and we just walk onto it when we are born. Althar flips that entirely. He says the world is only there because you perceive it.
Perception is not a passive camera just recording things. It is an active act of creation. It is the rendering engine of reality.
So if I don't perceive it, it fundamentally doesn't exist. That
Yeah.
sounds an awful lot like the old "if a tree falls in the forest" riddle.
It is exactly that riddle, but finally answered. Althar argues that all perception involves interpretation. You do not just see raw data. You interpret it instantly based on your personal filters, your past, your beliefs. So in a very literal mechanical sense, no two beings live in the same reality.
Because my filter is completely different from your filter.
Completely different. You and I are sitting in this same room right now, but you are living in your sphere of perception, and I'm living in mine. We might have a loose agreement on certain basic intentions, like we agree this is a table between us, but the nuance, the emotional texture, the actual lived reality of it is completely unique to you. You are actively creating your bubble of reality moment by perceiving it.
That is simultaneously incredibly empowering and absolutely terrifying, because if my reality sucks, if I am in a horrible car crash, or I get fired from my job, are you saying I created that? Because honestly, that sounds a whole lot like victim blaming.
That is the hardest hurdle for people to get over in this entire philosophy, and Althar addresses it head on. It is not about blame. Blame is a purely human judgment concept.
Yeah.
It is about responsibility in the truest sense, your ability to respond. You obviously didn't consciously sit down and say, I want to crash my car today.
Yeah.
But your wider sphere might have been holding a deep subconscious pattern of chaos or victimhood or a need for punishment. And the pure energy simply matched it.
So it is mostly unconscious creation.
Mostly yes, until you become what he calls a mage. You are basically creating unconsciously all the time. You are a sleepwalker wandering around with a loaded gun. The entire goal of this work is to wake up and finally see where you're pointing the gun.
Okay. So if we want to stop shooting ourselves in the foot constantly, we have to talk about the glue that basically holds this reality together. We have to talk about time. Because Althar really goes after the concept of linear time. He basically takes a sledgehammer to the clock.
He completely dismantles it.
Yeah.
And this is totally essential because you simply cannot understand how to change your reality if you still think you are stuck on a linear timeline.
So Althar says time is not a river. It is not flowing seamlessly from the past into the future.
No. He uses the analogy of spheres again to explain time. Imagine a 3D photograph, a complete hologram of a single frozen moment. Everything in this room right there, your thoughts, the exact temperature, the sound of my voice, the slight hum of the fridge in the background, all of it is captured in one single static sphere.
Like a total freeze frame.
A freeze frame. Now imagine billions and billions of these static spheres lined up in a row.
Like a film strip running through an old movie projector.
Exactly. We, as the consciousness, move our focus from one static sphere to the next very, very quickly. This rapid movement creates the illusion of motion. It creates the illusion of continuity. He calls this the thread of time. We are stringing these static pearls together to create a cohesive narrative.
Okay, I'm totally with you on the film strip analogy, but here is where it gets really interesting and kind of counterintuitive for me. I have always thought, and I think almost everyone naturally thinks this, that the past creates the future. I am who I am today strictly because of what happened to me yesterday. I have anxiety because I was yelled at constantly as a kid.
The classic cause and effect trap.
Right. But Althar says that entire way of thinking is completely backwards.
He says that is the core illusion keeping us stuck, because you are actually creating the next sphere from the current one. The past is nothing but a memory trace residing in the current sphere. It has absolutely zero inherent power.
Whoa, wait, say that again? The past has no power.
It has no power unless you actively use it to build the next sphere. Think about it mechanically. If time is just a series of static moments, the moment that happened 10 years ago is gone. It does not exist physically anymore. It is not sitting back there somewhere in a vault. The only place it exists is inside your current sphere as a memory or an emotional pattern.
So it's like I have a file saved on my mental desktop called Bad Childhood, and every single time I build a new moment of reality, I open up that file, copy it, and paste it right into the new moment.
That is exactly what you are doing. And Althar calls this a pattern. Patterns are just templates. Wake up, drink coffee, feel anxious about checking email. We reuse these templates constantly because it is very energy efficient. Consciousness in this dense state is kind of lazy in a way. It loves efficiency. Why invent a completely new emotional reaction every morning when we have this perfectly good, well-worn anxiety pattern just sitting on the shelf?
That explains so incredibly much. It explains why we all get stuck in such deep ruts. We are just lazy reality builders. We are using the exact same blueprints over and over again and wondering why the house always looks the same.
And worse, we actually get addicted to the patterns, even the incredibly painful ones. Victimhood is a massive pattern. Perpetual struggle is a pattern. The belief that I never have enough money is a pattern. They provide a false sense of identity. You start thinking, I am the person who always struggles.
Yeah.
That gives your ego continuity. It makes you feel safe in a really twisted way because at least it is familiar.
So how do we stop doing this? If I am totally addicted to the I am broke and constantly tired pattern, how do I actually stop copy-pasting it into the next frame of my movie? Because those patterns feel so automatic. I never feel like I'm consciously choosing them. They just hit me out of nowhere.
They feel automatic because the thread of time linking them is incredibly thick. You have reinforced that specific connection thousands and thousands of times, but you can cut it. And this brings us to the main tool mentioned in the text, the sword of clarity.
The sword of clarity. I definitely want one of those. But let's be real practical here. Is this just a mental visualization exercise? Am I supposed to be swinging an imaginary glowing sword at my boss?
Please do not swing imaginary swords at your boss in the office. It is an internal, energetic movement. It is a tool of pure discernment. Its entire function is to sever the threads of time.
What does that actually look like in daily practice? Let's role play this for a second. I get an email. It is from that one client who complains about absolutely everything. Immediately, my stomach just drops. I feel angry. My heart rate goes up. I remember the last 5 times they yelled at me on the phone. I am totally ready to fight back. What do I do with the sword in that exact moment?
Okay, stop. Freeze frame right there. In that exact moment, you are standing in the infinite now. You feel the immense urge to react that is the old pattern aggressively offering itself to you. It is basically screaming, here, use the anger blueprint again. It worked last time.
It is so tempting. It feels completely justified based on their history.
It only feels justified because you are actively linking it to the past. You are telling yourself, they yelled at me before, so they are yelling at me now. The sword of clarity is that split-second moment of pure awareness where you stop and say, no, that memory is a thread, and I am cutting it right now. You literally, energetically sever the connection between the past experience and the present moment.
So I just have to look at the hostile email as just pixels on a screen.
You look at the email as a completely neutral event happening exclusively in the now. You flat out refuse to drag the history of abuse into this specific new second. You cut the thread connecting them.
That sounds incredibly hard to actually do.
It is very hard because when you cut that thread, you instantly enter the void. You suddenly don't know what happens next. If you are not playing the role of the victim in this dynamic, who are you?
Right. If I am not the guy who aggressively fights with this annoying client, I literally do not know how to act. I have no script.
Exactly. You drop the script. But in that void, you become completely free to insert a brand new scene. You can choose to feel mildly amused by their complaining. You can choose to feel total indifference. You can even choose to feel compassion for whatever is making them so miserable. And instantly, the very next sphere of reality you build is different. You have fundamentally changed your timeline. You have finally stepped out of the loop.
It requires being totally willing to be nobody for a second, to just completely drop the story you've been telling yourself.
Yes, and there is a massive deep-seated reason why we are all so terrified to drop our stories. It is not just personal habit. The source material goes into a very specific collective historical reason why we struggle so much to use this creative power.
Okay, we have to get into this. The Atlantean trauma.
The Atlantean trauma.
Now, for everyone listening, this is where the text heavily shifts into a narrative story. And look, whether you literally believe in Atlantis as a historical, physical place with marble pillars and flying crystal cars, or whether you just treat it as a deep psychological myth or an allegory, the psychology here is totally fascinating. Althar, the dragon who is speaking in the text, claims he was once a human living in Atlantis.
Right. This forms the entire narrative anchor of the book. He describes a massive civilization that wasn't just technologically advanced like we are today with our iPhones and internet. They were advanced in consciousness. They were literally studying and manipulating raw energy directly.
Althar was apparently a major leader there. He achieved enlightenment. He built this massive thing he calls a temple of beauty.
It sounds incredibly idyllic. He describes it so vividly. Beautiful gardens, glowing crystals, a huge community living in perfect harmony. He had a deep partner named Eknatara. They were living as fully realized divine beings. Embodied ascension, this insanely hard thing we are trying to do right now, was actively happening back then on a large scale. They were the ultimate proof of concept.
So what on earth went wrong? Because obviously, look out the window. We are not living in a crystal paradise right now.
The fall happened. And it wasn't a random asteroid strike or a natural flood, at least not initially. It was because of technology.
It is always the tech that gets us.
Always. Althar discovered how to actually lock in tension permanently into crystals. Basically, he figured out how to program physical matter to do complex things automatically. Think of it like modern AI. But instead of running on binary code, it runs on pure psychic will and energy. It was the ultimate, limitless power.
And like literally all ultimate power in history.
Someone immediately wanted to weaponize it. Other factions and groups in Atlantis became intensely greedy. They looked at this temple of beauty not as a spiritual sanctuary, but as an incredibly potent weapons factory. The text describes a sudden and completely brutal attack.
This part of the book is actually really heavy to read. It is not dry, airy philosophy at all. He talks about the thick smoke, the screaming, the absolute destruction.
They massacred almost everyone. They killed all of his devoted students. They killed his partner, Eknatara. Althar returned from a quiet spiritual retreat to find his entire world completely and utterly destroyed. The exact same crystals he had lovingly tuned for beauty and healing were being used to literally tear people apart.
And this is the massive pivot point of the whole story, because Althar is fully enlightened, right?
Yeah.
He is eternal consciousness. He knows he can't actually die in the spiritual sense. He knows the physical world is ultimately an illusion. But as a human being who loved those people, he's completely devastated.
He is totally broken. He is completely overwhelmed by unimaginable guilt. He feels personally responsible because he is the one who invented the tech. He made the crystals that caused all this slaughter. So he withdrew deep into a bubble of absolute despair. But the text says this wasn't just one man's personal tragedy. This exact trauma happened on a massive collective scale. The fall of Atlantis was a total collapse of mass consciousness, where extremely high technology met incredibly low spiritual wisdom.
And here is the really scary part for us today. The text says the souls involved in that catastrophe, the perpetrators who attacked, the victims who died, the scientists who built it, they all reincarnated. And that could very well be us.
Althar strongly suggests it is us, you and me.
Yeah.
And in that horrifying moment of destruction, as the entire continent sank and the civilization burned to ash, we all swore a deep collective vow.
The vow of never again.
Never again.
Think about the massive implication of that for a second. We're not just talking about a promise to never build a crystal death ray again.
No, not at all. We fundamentally equated high spiritual power and crystal technology and magic directly with death and destruction. We literally wired it into our spiritual DNA. We told ourselves, if I become truly powerful, innocent people die. If I open up my full consciousness again, I will accidentally destroy the world.
So if I start getting a little too enlightened today, if I start meditating really deep, or I start manifesting things easily, or I just start feeling genuinely powerful in my life,
Your subconscious mind instantly pulls the emergency brake. It screams, stop, danger, remember the fire, remember the pain, turn it off.
that is the ultimate safety mechanism.
That is the safety mechanism.
Yeah.
And that is exactly why we constantly self-sabotage our spiritual growth. That is why we get so close to a massive breakthrough in our lives, and then suddenly we get mysteriously sick, or we get totally distracted by some drama, or we just get scared and pick a massive fight with our spouse. We are absolutely terrified of our own light because we vaguely remember it burning everything down.
That is really heavy, but it perfectly explains so much about the intense resistance people feel. I know so many people who say they desperately want to be happy and successful, but the very moment things get a little too good, they completely blow it up.
They are subconsciously protecting the world from themselves. It is a very twisted, tragic form of nobility.
So how do we actually fix this? How do we deactivate this ancient safety switch? Do we all need to go do intense past life regression therapy? Do I need to sit there and find out if I was an Atlantean crystal polisher who got vaporized?
Thankfully, no. Althar is very clear on this point. You do not heal this massive trauma through endless archaeological therapy. You do not need to dig up every painful memory of Atlantis and cry about it on a couch for 20 years. Doing that is just feeding another pattern that is just spinning the endless wheel of karma.
Thank God for that. Because I definitely do not have time or money for another 20 years of therapy.
You just use the sword of clarity. You recognize the whole thing is just a story. Althar says you have to look directly at that trauma, that massive collective scar in your psyche, and clearly say, that was an experience, but it is not me.
You just cut the thread linking you to it.
You firmly cut the thread. You realize that the never again vow is completely obsolete now. We're in a totally different time. We've developed different wisdom. You have to consciously say, I am not the traumatized Atlantean who destroyed the world. I am the eternal sphere of consciousness experiencing this current moment. You completely release the deep identification with the guilt.
And once you finally clear that deeply rooted fear, once you actually convince your internal nervous system that it is finally safe to be powerful again, you can actually start doing the real work of embodied ascension. You can start building the light body.
Correct. You can finally keep the ping pong ball underwater without all the massive stress and friction.
Let's talk about the end result of all this work. The new mage. That is literally the title of the book. Who exactly is the new mage?
The new mage is someone who has fully realized enlightenment. They have completed stage 1, but they consciously choose to stay here in the dense physical world to create a brand new pattern for humanity. They are the ones who deliberately break the old loop.
And to survive doing that, they desperately need this light body structure we talked about.
Right. The light body is their necessary vessel. But a huge question arises. How do you actually treat your fragile biological body while you are busy building this massive light body? This leads to what is honestly my absolute favorite metaphor in the entire text. It is so incredibly disarming.
You mean the pet metaphor?
Yes, the pet metaphor.
But the source actually suggests that we should treat our physical human body, this thing we identify with so closely, like a beloved pet, like a dog or a cat.
It sounds kind of funny at first, but it powerfully shifts your entire center of identity. Right now, most normal people think, I am this physical body. This sharp back pain is my back pain. This sudden hunger is my hunger. Althar strongly suggests you shift your core identity to the light body, the eternal field of energy. From that new, higher perspective, your biological body is just this cute, furry little animal that you are taking for a walk through a physical lifetime.
I actually have a golden retriever. And she is really great, but she's also incredibly needy. She gets hungry at random times. She gets overly tired. She gets absolutely terrified of loud thunder.
Exactly. Now think about this. When she gets terrified of thunder, do you get furiously angry at her? Do you look at her and say, well, why aren't you brave? Why aren't you an enlightened God?
No, of course not. I say, oh, sweetie, it's okay. I sit down and pet her. I give her a little treat to calm her down.
You naturally treat her with deep compassion. But you absolutely do not expect her to sit down and do your complex taxes or solve your deep existential life crisis.
Right.
You clearly recognize her biological limitations. Althar says we urgently need to treat our own physical bodies the exact same way.
That honestly takes so much relentless pressure off. I feel like I am constantly mad at my own body for being tired or aching when I want to work. I'm always mentally yelling at it like, come on, work harder, keep up. But if I just treat it like a golden retriever, it's like, oh, buddy, you're tired. That's totally fine. Good boy. Let's just go take a nap.
It creates a healthy distance that is actually full of profound love. It is compassionate detachment. You finally stop expecting your fragile biology to carry the massive weight of your eternal soul. You let the light body handle all the heavy lifting of reality creation, the magic, the intention, the energy work, and you just let the physical body enjoy the pleasant ride. The body isn't the captain of the ship anymore. It is just a pampered passenger.
And Althar explicitly mentions dragon energy coming into play here too, right?
Yes, he does. He says, dragon energy, which in this context represents absolute clarity and profound wisdom, is fully available to support you in this transition. But he is exceptionally clear on one point. Dragons do not save you. They aren't going to miraculously swoop down from the sky and pay your overdue rent. They act as companions. The text jokes that they like to fly along, balancing on ping pong balls.
I really love that absurd image. A giant majestic dragon precariously balancing on a tiny floating ping pong ball.
It is totally absurd, but it perfectly captures the required joy of it. The new mage is fundamentally playful. They are not overly serious and grim.
But let's circle back to the magic part for a second, because the word mage inherently implies doing magic. Are we talking about actually levitating off the ground or shooting fireballs out of our hands?
Interestingly, the text actually says levitation and bending spoons and things like that are technically possible, but they're ultimately boring. They're just useless party tricks that distract you.
Okay, so what is true magic then, according to a dragon?
True magic is the profound ability to step completely out of a destructive pattern instantly. It is defined as creation through feeling. The text warns that you shouldn't just visualize what you want. Mere mental visualization is weak. You have to literally feel the absolute fulfillment of it right now. You generate the exact emotional frequency of it is already done deeply within your sphere. And then the pure energy effortlessly rearranges itself to match that feeling.
So it is basically advanced emotional engineering.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But here is the massive catch. And this brings us directly to section 6 of the book, which I honestly think is the most frustratingly challenging part for people who consider themselves hardcore spiritual seekers. People who have a shelf full of 50 self-help books.
Ah, yes, the paradox.
The paradox of enlightenment. The text states this incredibly boldly, essentially in all caps so you don't miss it. You cannot create enlightenment.
Which is incredibly annoying to hear because I have personally spent a whole lot of money on expensive weekend courses that specifically promised I could create it.
We all have. We are deeply addicted to walking the path. But Althar's core point is that creating something inherently implies linear time. It implies I am stuck over here right now, and I need to do a bunch of hard work to get over there in the future. It implies relentless effort. It implies that you are currently a broken thing that desperately needs to be fixed.
So by actively trying to get enlightened, I am actually pushing it further away from me.
Exactly. Trying to get enlightened is literally just another pattern. It is the insidious pattern of becoming. And patterns, as we learned, just loop endlessly. If you are stuck in the pattern of trying to become enlightened, you will successfully do exactly that forever. You will always be fiercely trying, but never actually being. The universe just looks at you and says, oh, you really want to try? Okay, here is some more struggle so you can keep trying forever.
So what are we supposed to do then? Just throw our hands up and give up? That feels like a massive failure.
In a weird way, yes.
Yeah.
You give up the desperate search. You give up the entire concept that there is somewhere better to go. The only actual practice Althar recommends is incredibly simple. Just be aware.
That sounds way too simple. Just be aware.
It is paradoxically simple, which makes it hard. Just be aware of being aware. He says, in the moment of pure awareness, absolutely nothing is lacking. When you finally stop aggressively trying to fix the human self, when you stop trying to fix the pet and you just step back into that infinite sphere of consciousness we talked about, you realize you are already there. You are already the pure light. You don't have to strain to create the sun. You just have to stop obsessively staring at the dark clouds.
But I simply cannot stay in that state. I can maybe hold it for like 3 whole seconds. I feel the profound peace, and then I suddenly remember I need to go buy milk, or I notice that my left knee really hurts.
And your immediate reaction is to think that means you totally failed.
Yeah, I feel like I totally fell out of enlightenment and ruined it.
Althar says that falling out is actually perfect. He calls this process flickering.
Flickering, like a bad, broken, fluorescent light bulb.
More like a deliberate strobe light. You will naturally flicker in and out of the state. One moment, you are the vast, eternal sphere of consciousness, totally and completely at peace with the universe. The very next moment, you are just a frustrated human, intensely annoyed at the high price of milk. But then you catch yourself and remember, oh, right, I am the eternal sphere, and you just flicker right back.
And he claims this constant flickering is actually safe.
He says it is absolutely necessary. If you forced yourself to stay in the absolute high voltage state 24/7 immediately, you would literally fry your biological circuits. Your body, the poor pet, would completely freak out from the sheer intensity. The flickering process allows the dense biology to slowly and gently adjust to the massive new frequency. It is a necessary, gentle integration. So you really shouldn't beat yourself up for flickering. It's a core part of the process.
That honestly makes me feel a whole lot better about my meditation practice. It makes the whole daunting thing feel somewhat manageable. It is not about being some perfect ascetic monk on a mountaintop holding a lotus pose for 80 straight years.
Yeah.
It is really just about being a regular, flawed person who remembers every now and then, oh, wait a minute, I am actually an eternal dragon rider.
Precisely. And every single time you remember, you actively strengthen the light body. You make the ping pong ball a little bit heavier and a little bit more stable in the ocean.
So let's take a minute to really synthesize all of this. Because we have covered a truly massive amount of bizarre ground today, we established that we have vast spheres of consciousness, not just biological bodies. We actually create our entire reality moment to moment via our core intention and perception. We get hopelessly trapped in loops of linear time because we lazily keep pasting past traumas into our future spheres. We all carry this ancient collective Atlantean trauma that makes us deeply terrified of our own inherent power, our internal safety switch. But we can consciously use this sort of clarity to decisively cut those old threads and finally step into being new mages.
That is the complete journey in a nutshell. It is a total ground-up rewrite of the human operating system.
And so what here? Why should the average listener care about ancient Atlantis or floating ping pong balls? Why not just live a completely normal, quiet life and ignore all this?
Because the so-called normal life is just the endless loop. It is the exact same history aggressively repeating itself over and over. This material deeply matters because it forcefully moves spiritual practice away from the exhausting idea of fixing a broken, sinful human being. It moves it toward the idea of a perfect divine being simply enjoying a temporary physical experience. It fundamentally turns life from a grueling school where you have to learn painful lessons and suffer just to get a passing grade into a massive playground.
I really, really love that perspective shift. Moving from a strict school to an open playground.
The true New Age is absolutely not here to learn basic lessons anymore. The New Age is here to play, to freely create entirely new patterns just for the sheer joy of seeing what happens.
Now, before we wrap this up and sign off, we absolutely have to talk about the epilogue of the text, because it completely threw me for a loop when I read it. It is this incredibly short little scene at the very end of the book. It honestly gave me full-body chills.
It is a profoundly moving little scene. It basically describes Althar, his original human version, back in the beautiful days of Atlantis before the fall, waking up from a deep nap.
He is just taking a normal nap. He is just sitting under a shady tree, right?
Yes. He peacefully wakes up, rubs his eyes, looks around, and tells the dragon that he just had an incredibly terrible nightmare.
And the terrible nightmare he had was us.
The nightmare was, as he describes it, thousands of years of chaos, slaughter, and deep confusion. He essentially dreamt the horrific fall of Atlantis. He dreamt the brutal Roman Empire. He dreamt the devastating world wars. He literally dreamt the entire tragic history of modern humanity, all the intense struggle, all the pain.
And the dragon looks at him sitting under the tree and asks him, why would pure consciousness ever choose to create such a horrifying dream? Why would you deliberately dream of such intense suffering?
And Althar just kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, maybe just because.
Maybe just because. That is wild.
It is the ultimate cosmic punchline to the whole massive joke.
It really is. It deeply suggests that absolutely all of this, the intense daily drama, the deep historical trauma, the heavy history we all take so incredibly seriously, the petty things we fight over every single day, all of it might just be a brief, chaotic little nap taken by your true self.
And the massive implication for you listening is you are finally waking up right now. The long nightmare is finally over. You are just rubbing your eyes, checking your pockets to make sure your crystals are still there, and realizing it was all just a wild, vivid dream. You are perfectly safe. You have always been perfectly safe. You never actually left the beautiful garden in the first place.
That is an incredibly provocative thought to leave you with today. What if you aren't actually struggling through a hard life at all? What if you are really just slowly waking up from a very weird nap under a tree?
It definitely drastically changes how you look at your daily problems. It makes them feel so much smaller, like fleeting shadows from a dream fading in the morning light.
It sure does. So for all of you listeners out there, try to take your own sort of clarity out this week. See exactly what rusty old threads you can cut in your daily life. See what worn out patterns you are blindly running just because you are being a bit lazy. And maybe, just maybe, try to treat your physical body like a really good dog and just give it a nice treat for once.
And above all,